everyone, I'm Dave Thomas, and today I am building the Cheetah, and this is another Aerotech kit that they've moved over to their Enerjet mid-power rocket line. And so we'll go ahead and open this up. Alright, so these nifty little boxes compartmentalize everything. Now when we go to look at our parts list here, they don't illustrate it, so this is a little more difficult to make sure you've got everything. Also, there is a supplemental piece of instructions here, and this is because of the motor retainer upgrade. Okay, so the newer kits now have an aluminum screw-on motor retainer, and so some of the parts that are listed are no longer in here. So the thrust ring flange, motor hook, motor adapter tube, and adapter rings are no longer included in the kit. Okay, so there won't be any motor adapter or motor tube, or excuse me, no motor adapter. Alright, so we can skip that part. And the motor tube assembly is going to be a little bit different. Alright, so we should then be able to go back to our list here. Alright, so no motor adapter tube or rings, no E-spacer tube, and alright, so thrust ring and thrust ring flange are also gone. Alright, we do have our motor mount tube, 29mm tube. Alright, no motor hook. We do have instead the aluminum retainer there. Alright, centering rings are in this package. The fin lock rings, and these are the plastic things here. That's good. Alright, the cooling mesh is in there, and that will be mounted directly inside the motor mount tube, and so this provides a type of ejection baffle. Alright, and that's also included here. Alright, and then a shock cord is in there. A screw eye. Okay, the launch lugs are, looks like these are actually square launch lugs. Alright, we have the nose cone, the main body tube. Okay, the self-adhesive decals here, there are 2 sheets of those. We have a 16-inch parachute. And depending on what your rocket weighs when you get it all done, you might think about upgrading this. I think this may be a little bit too light, but we'll see how it goes. Alright, and then we've got the instructions here. Okay, so this is, so this is a spacer tube there. I think that's what they're calling the F spacer tube. Alright, it looks like we've got everything. Fins are in there. I think we're ready to go. So I will clear most of this away and we will get started on the kit. Our first task is to start building the motor mount. And here we're going to use the revised location that's in this upgrade notice. So we don't use the location shown in the instruction sheet. Alright, shown here. Alright, so this is the original locator guide up here. We don't want that. We're going to use the revised one. Alright, now our motor mount tube is pre-marked with a line going down it, and so we can just follow this line. So I'm just going to come back here first of all and mark this as aft, so we don't get this turned around later. Okay, so from the aft end, we need a mark at 1.5 inches. Alright, and then another mark at 3 9/16. Alright. Place that one there. Okay, so now we can go back to our regular instructions here. Alright, so we're going to need a fin lock ring here. Alright, now these have a little open area here. This would have been for the engine clip. We don't need that now, but we'll still use it to align. Okay, so we're going to start with the front end here. Alright, and these can go on in either direction. If you see a little flash there, go ahead and take that off. Alright, but I'm going to go ahead and align that space there with the line on the tube. Okay, and that's going to come down. Alright, and the rearward edge should be lined up with that forward mark. There we go. Okay, and then we have these fiber centering rings. And one of those is going to go over as well and also line up like so. Okay, and then we're going to do a similar thing with the other fin lock ring here. Again, remove any plastic flash there. Okay, and this is going to go up until we reach the other mark there. Okay, now we do need to make sure these are lined up really well. And in fact, I'm going to use a fin here. A little bit of flash. Okay, so we can just use a fin to slide in there. These are really tight, which I suppose they are supposed to be. There, we'll just pop it in that way. Okay, and so this way we can use that to make sure we're lined up properly. That one looks okay. Okay, and so then we're going to add the other centering ring here, and again line that up. That one's actually a little bit loose. Okay, so we've got everything aligned there. Here I've removed the aft centering ring, but we won't put that on until a little bit later. And for now, the forward ring is still just friction fit in place, as are the fin mounts here. And next we're just going to put all of these in to make sure that we're aligned. Okay, so that looks pretty good there. So now we'll take these out again. Now to glue this in place, the manufacturers recommend using a medium viscosity cyanoacrylate glue or super glue. So I'm going to go ahead and go with that. Here I've just put down some paper towels so that we don't get glue on the work surface. Alright, now the instructions indicate that we're going to put the forward centering ring right up against the motor mount there, and then we're going to apply a bead of glue right here. Now I don't have any true medium viscosity. I've got a gel and I've got just regular viscosity, so I'm using the thicker one here that I've had better luck on when gluing dissimilar surfaces together here. And then I can just take a swab and basically make a fillet out of this. And super glue does not need to be thick. And by thick I mean heavy here. Alright, and then it says to put super glue all around the forward area except right where the fin locks are. So I'll just use my swab to fill in part of this. Okay, now this again was the old engine clip that we don't have to worry about now, so we can just glue over it as well. Okay, and again, just stay away from the fin locks. Alright, and some of you may be thinking, why don't we actually glue, put glue in place first and then slide these in? And the instructions say that this is actually quite enough to hold everything in place. So I'm just going to trust them here. Okay, and now we're going to do the same thing here. That's why I've got my towel down. Same thing here now on the forward edge of the rear. Fin locks here. Almost got some in there. And here again, we're just going to smooth this around. Okay, and at this time it says do not put any glue on the rear part there. Okay, so while I'm waiting for the fin locks to dry, I'm going to go ahead and turn my attention now to the body tube here. And the fin slots are pre-cut, but they may not be all the way out yet. So we'll want to just gently slice those. Now my rings still have their glue drying, but we're in a position here where we can move on to the next step, and that is to cut some slots here about 1/4 inch down from the forward end and 90 degrees apart. Now these don't have to be exact. This is just opening the tube a little bit to make fitting the baffle plate easier, and we're going to fill these in with glue once we've got that done. Alright, so here's the baffle plate, and we're just going to pop that in there just as a dry fit here. And you can see how they kind of expand out. Now actually I dry fitted this without the slots, and it worked fine too. So if you dry fit this beforehand, you may or may not need the slots there to accommodate it. Alright, now we're going to take this mesh and we're supposed to stretch this out to about 6 inches. And the idea here is that the mesh is going to trap burning ejection charge particles while still allowing the gases to pressurize the body tube and eject the nose cone and recovery system. Alright, so we're going to go about like there, and then we're just going to stuff this down inside. Okay, now we don't want any glue on that, so I've actually stuffed it down quite a ways in there. Let's see, kind of almost see it, maybe not, and that's okay. Okay, and now we're going to apply some glue here. Okay, about 2/3 of the way up, and we'll just put a bead of glue right around this. If you're half instead of 2/3, it's fine. Most of this is going to get squished up into the corner anyway. There we go. Okay, now we're just going to put that on and twist it as we go, and that's going to make its own fillet there. Okay, and according to the instructions, we apply a bead of cement around here, and like I said, with mine being the thick cement that it is, it's already done that. And now what I'm going to do is just take a swab here and work that down into those slots so that they don't provide a leakage point for hot gases. Alright, and then we're just going to smooth that all the way around here. Just like that. Alright, next we need the screw eye. Okay, now for this, I'm going to do a little bit differently. They just have you screw this in and leave it there. I'm going to screw it in and then apply some cement to it. So here I'll thread it, and I'm going to leave just a little bit of thread exposed there. And I'm going to back this back out. And I'm going to squirt a little bit of my super glue into that hole. You don't need a lot, so it's just going to work its way into the threads. And this time I'm going to put it in until I don't see any thread exposed. Just like that. Now, according to the instructions, our next task is to tie the elastic shock cord here directly to the screw eye, and you can do that. Okay, so they just say to take one end of this, tie it in place with a square knot. Be sure to leave a little bit on the loose end or on the free end here so it doesn't pull through the knot. Now, they do caution that you don't want to use super glue on this. But I would recommend, if you're going to do it this way, putting just a little dab of wood glue or white glue on the knot to hold it in place. Now I'm going to modify this just a little bit, and I'm going to use a Kevlar shock cord for the beginning of it. Basically just enough to allow it to come out of the end of the body tube, and then I can tie the elastic onto it, because the elastic generally is not going to be as durable as the Kevlar is, and so if I end up launching this a lot, eventually that elastic's going to give out, and it's a lot easier then to just untie the old elastic from the Kevlar than to try and get down and retie a piece onto the motor mount itself. Here I have a piece of Kevlar shock cord. This is probably about 300-pound test. It's actually overkill for this rocket. If I had 200-pound, I would have used that. You could even use 100-pound. The reason I'm not is 100-pound test Kevlar is very thin and would increase the risk of zippering the body tube. So to do this, first we're going to take one end and simply tie a loop in it. Like this. Okay, we want to leave a little bit here on the free end. Now this is a place where you can use a little bit of super glue on a knot. So Kevlar has no problems with super glue, but it doesn't hold knots well. So I'm just going to put a little drop there on the knot, and when that hardens, that'll keep that from becoming untied. And it really doesn't significantly affect the strength of the Kevlar there. Alright, now I'm going to measure this roughly against the body tube. Bring the body tube out here. Now I'm going to place my motor mount tube about where it's going to be. Alright, so this needs just to come out to about just beyond the body tube here. Okay, so I don't need this whole length. I'm going to go ahead and cut this. Alright, and now I'm going to tie a loop in the other end. Ideally, I want this to go right at the end of the body tube so that it doesn't actually stick out. It is going to stick out a little bit, but that's okay. Alright, and as before, I'm going to go ahead and put a little bit of super glue on this knot as well. Now if you want to speed things up, you can add just a little bit of alcohol to that knot. And that's really all most of those super glue accelerators you can buy for a ridiculous amount of money. They're just alcohol. Some of them are baking soda. Alright, but that'll accelerate things there. Alright, now I'll put the body tube away for the moment. Okay, and now all I'm going to do is take one of these loops and I'm going to pass it through the eyelet there, and I'm going to take the other loop and pass that through the first loop there, just like that, and then we're just going to pull this down. Pull that knot through once more, and then around itself. Here, we'll get it all out. There we go. Okay, and now once I have this installed in the body tube, then I can go ahead and tie my square knot here on the Kevlar, and then if I do need to remove it, it's much easier to just snip this off, put a new piece on. The Kevlar itself will withstand a whole lot more launch and ejection charges than will the elastic here. So I'm going to just set this aside and we'll put that on when we do the final assembly. In preparation for installing the fins, we need to break off this part of the fin tab here. And you can just use a pair of pliers for this, so just grasp the part you want and just bend it down and up a little bit there. We're going to have a rough surface here that will sand in just a moment. But go ahead and do this to all of the fins. Now you can also think about how you're going to paint this. If you want to paint your fins a different color, or even just leave them the plastic color here, then what you want to do is paint the rest of the rocket first and then install this stuff. Okay, now if you want to paint the fins a different color before installing them, you want to make sure that you mask off these fin tabs and the underside here, the root edges of the fin, so that you don't have paint on those, because those are what are going to get glued to the rocket. I'm going to go ahead and install mine first and paint the rocket all together. Okay, now to smooth out that rough plastic here, you can use some 100 to 150 grit sandpaper. And you just need a few strokes across here. Just remove that rough stuff. Don't go too far, because this is also what you need to glue. Okay. Now when we get to the point of actually installing the fins, we might need to do a little fine tuning there if they're still sticking out too far. But those look like they're going to be okay. We are almost ready to attach everything here. I'm going to use my hobby knife and remove some more of this flash here. It's kind of the remnants of our sanding. We've got little bits of flash here on the tabs, and so you can either scrape those off with a knife or use a little bit of sandpaper. Be careful you don't cut yourself, or sand yourself for that matter. That can hurt just as much. Now what we're going to do is take our motor mount here and the shock cord, no matter which shock cord you're using. All right, we're going to slide the shock cord down through the aft end of the rocket, and then our tabs here for the fins should line up with the slots in the motor mount, in the body tube, excuse me. Alright, so there we've got our receptacles, and those should be good all the way around. May need to do a little trimming there like I had on mine. First I'm going to dry fit these once more, and so they should just pop right in. Okay, now I've got a bit of a gap there, and that probably means I need to sand this just a little bit more. Okay, we just want to get that sanded stuff out of there. Alright, then we'll try this again. Alright, now I'm going to check from behind. Let's see if you can see. Can't quite see in there. Okay, but it is making contact. It's just not going down all the way. There we go. Okay, so what I had to do is actually stick my finger up inside there to get enough leverage, and they do snap like that. Okay, so that's what we want, but now I have to take it back out, which may be easier said than done. I'm just going to do it this way. So the idea is you're supposed to put some glue on the root edges here where it's going to meet the tube before you snap those in. But once that's in, that thing just really does not want to come out again. So I'm going to use some regular viscosity super glue and just kind of bend this a little bit. Just enough to get some in there. Okay, do the same thing over here. I need 3 hands. Actually, that's working through. So we'll just leave it at that. Okay, so now we know what we need to do. You just got to push really hard on that thing. Alright, so for my other ones here, I can go ahead and use my thicker super glue. I'm just going to use a very thin bead though. To really get some leverage on that to get it in there. There we go. Alright, and then a little bit more glue here on my last fin. No, not quite. I'm afraid I might crush the thing. Let's try. I'm going to stick a motor casing up here. So. There we go. Alright, so if you got a dead motor casing, that might help you get better leverage there. However, you can see where I kind of squashed the tube there. I really don't want to do that. Okay, now they sent us both launch lugs, there's kind of squarish looking ones, and conformal rail guides here. Now the slots are actually meant for these, as they've got a little bit of a protrusion here, and that is meant to go into those slots like that and give them some conformation to the body tube. Alright. The rail guides you can put just about anywhere. And so if you decide to, you could do both. You could put the launch lugs in the slots that are indicated here and then turn over a face and put the rail guides as well. For now, I'm just going to do the launch lugs. Alright, so I'm just going to quickly check these for any flash and remove that. Now this slope surface here should be forward facing on both of them. Okay, and here I'm going to try the regular viscosity super glue. And basically I'm just running it alongside the little alignment piece there. Alright, and then that should just poke right in. Okay, and then we'll do the same thing for the other one. Okay, and that one's in place. And now I'm just going to let all of this glue dry for at least an hour before we get to the final assembly. Now that the fin glue is all dry, we're going to put in the final part here, so the aft centering ring. And so this just needs to pop in between the body tube and the motor mount. And that may be a little easier said than done. I have to squish things around a little bit here. There we go. And then once you have it in place, you can take a stick and just keep pushing it down until it is up against the fin tabs back in there. Okay, so once you can't make that move any farther, I'm going to bring this up a little bit. Alright, can't quite see down in there. Maybe just get a little bit in. Let me move my light a little bit. Alright, so you can just see the ring down in there. And so now we're going to take an applicator here and some wood glue. Alright, so this is the one part where you really don't want to use thick cyanoacrylate glue. You could, but this is going to give you a much stronger adhesion here. Okay, so we're going to come down, and it's better to get glue on the body tube here than on the motor mount tube, because the motor mount is still going to have some epoxy on it when we put the retainer in. Alright, but mainly what we're doing here is we're making fillets all around that aft centering ring there. Okay, I'll put just a little bit more in. Alright, and I'm going to use the stick part of my applicator here just to kind of squeegee up some of this excess glue there. Alright, and even if you can't get it out, make it as thin as you can there. And do this on both the inside of the body tube and the outside of the motor mount tube. Now when we've got this all done, we'll go ahead and put the motor mount on. Okay, and so this part here with the threads, that's going to go over the motor mount tube and sit about there. Alright, I'm going to take that off for now. Okay, and the reason I'm going to take it off now is so it doesn't get in the way when I'm painting. If you want, you can put it on right away and then mask it off to paint it. But I'm just going to wait on mine. Now I'm going to attach the shock cord here. Now again, if you didn't do the Kevlar part that I did here, this will have already been attached down inside there. Alright, so what I'm going to do now is first just tie a loop in one end. So I'm just going to use an overhand knot, what's called a water knot here. Alright, I'm just going to pull that down tight. Alright, now the excess here I'm going to snip back to about 1/4 inch or 6 millimeters there, just so it's not in the way. But we don't want to cut it all the way at the knot or it may come undone. And then here I'm going to add a little bit of white or wood glue, or in my case white wood glue. All right, just a little bit there, and work that into the knot, and that'll just help keep that from coming undone accidentally. Okay, now to attach this to my other loop, I'm going to thread the loop through the loop like this. Actually, I'm going to ignore that. I'm going to go through here. So I'm putting the Kevlar loop through the elastic loop, and now I'm going to put the free end of the elastic and just pull that all the way through the loop. And then as I pull this through, those two loops will intertwine there, and that gives you about the strongest joint you can get. Okay? Now I'm just going to set this aside. Once that glue dries, I'm just going to stuff everything down inside and put a paper towel in there, and then this will be ready for painting. About the last thing we need to do structurally is prepare the nose cone for painting. So this nose cone was molded in two halves, and you can see it's got a definite seam here where those halves came together. Now, depending on your personal aesthetic, you can just leave this alone if you want and just fly it with the seams there. What I prefer to do, though, is start with some 150 grit sandpaper and knock down at least the areas that are sticking up. Now, you also have some valleys in there, and it's harder to sand those out. I will show you a way that we can treat that. But the first thing I'm going to do is just work on these really obvious seams here with some 150 grit sandpaper. Now you can still see some seam there, but it's a lot less noticeable. Mostly what we can still see are the valleys that are in the seam. Okay, and now I'm going to take some 220 grit sandpaper and sand the entire nose cone. But I'm going to wet sand that. You don't have to, you can dry sand it. But I like the results from wet sanding it. So I'm going to go take that over to my sink and wet sand with 220 and then come back. Here's what it looks like after sanding with 220 grit sandpaper. Now I've sanded the entire nose cone at this point to give it a uniform finish. And you can see it's not glossy, but it is fairly smooth. You can see some sanding lines there. And that's actually something I'm looking for, because this is either a polypropylene or a polyethylene nose cone, and paint doesn't stick well to those plastics. And so if you sand it where you can actually still see a little bit of the sanding grain there, that gives it a toothiness that allows paint to adhere better. Now I'll probably go ahead and use some 320 grit sanding paper on this just to even things out a little bit more. But that's still not going to give me a polished look. It'll still be dull and good to paint. Now, if you do want to fill in the seam here, and I'm not going to do it on mine, it's not very obvious, but you can use a plastic model putty, and I've got two brands here. We've got the Mr. Hobby, Mr. White Putty here, and we've got the Testors Contour Putty. Both these work in about the same way, and you just smooth it in with a finger, let it dry, and then sand that, and then repeat as necessary until you get the finish that you want. All right, so as I said, I'm not going to use those. I am going to go back and sand this, wet sand this with 320 grit sandpaper, and then we'll come back. Here's the nose cone after the final sanding. All right, still has a little bit of the valley there, but that's okay. Some of that will go away when I prime this as well. And so now I'm going to take both the main rocket body and the nose cone, and I'm going to first give these a couple of coats of primer. And I use a filling sandable primer that helps fill in some of the small scratches and grooves there. And then on top of that, I'll add a red paint. So I'm going to try and make this at least close to what's on the box, using a red paint color, and then we'll have the white decals over that. All right, and some of you may be gasping, saying, whoa, he's actually going to make one like the box. Yeah, I do it occasionally. All right, so these are going to go get painted, and when we come back, I'll have this all nice and red, and we'll be ready to put everything together. Now, before I get the body tube ready for priming and paint, I do want to just take note of a few things that you can either ignore or fix as your want. So the fins themselves have some little imperfections in here. We've also got some residue left from the masking tape that held them together. And so the residue, you can use a little bit of rubbing alcohol and just some hard scrubbing to remove that. The little imperfections, though, you can use some very fine grit sandpaper to remove those, like 400 grit or higher, or you can just ignore them. Also, the fins have built-in fillets here, but there are places where there are little gaps between the fin and the body tube. And again, you can either just ignore those and just go ahead and paint it, or you can use the plastic model putty here that I showed earlier for the nose cone, and you can run fillets over the fillets with this and then sand those out. Right. On mine, I'm just going to clean up the little bits of adhesive residue here, but otherwise I'm not going to worry about the plastic or the gaps here. I'll just fill those in as best I can with the primer and paint. While I'm waiting for the primer to dry on the rocket, there is one more thing we can do here with the parachute. Now, this is optional. It comes with a 16-inch parachute. It's nylon, pretty nice one here. And according to the instructions, they just have us tie this onto the nose cone. All right, now I can't actually show that right now because the nose cone's got wet primer on it. All right, but generally what you would do is simply take all of the loops here. And I'm going to do that anyway, so let's just spread this out. Okay, and then grab our loops over one finger here like this, and then I'm going to grab the middle of the parachute and pull everything until it's all taut. And ideally, all of the corners of the parachute should be in about the same spot there, and you can kind of adjust things back and forth to get as close as you can. Once you've got that, now if you're just going to follow the instructions, you would take all of these loops here, slide them through the nose cone eyelet, and then pass the entire parachute through that loop and pull it tight. Okay. Now, if you've seen my other videos, you know I really like snap swivels, and this rocket is kind of right on the borderline between whether I'm going to use a big snap swivel or a small barrel swivel and a quick link. I'm going to go ahead and go with the snap swivel here. But I do recommend doing this, especially with this model, because this is kind of on the borderline with the parachute too. I'm thinking that 16 inches is going to come down a little bit too fast. Now I might want to pull a bigger chute out and install that instead. Alright, so what I've done here is simply passed all those loops through the swivel side here, the round side of my snap swivel, not the snappy part. Alright, and then I'm going to take the entire swivel, pass that through the loops, and then I'm just going to pull that whole thing taut. Okay, and now here again, if you've seen some of the videos for my larger mid-power or some high-power rockets, I'll even take some shrink wrap tubing and put that over here to cinch it all down. With this one, I think it's small enough that I will just put on a little dab of white or wood glue here. Okay, so we'll just pull all that good stuff down there, and then I'm just going to put a little dab of glue where it all comes together. That's more than enough. Okay, so I'm just going to take that and kind of work it through the sides there. Okay, and then just let that dry. And then when you're ready to fly, you can simply open that up, snap it onto the eyelet of the nose cone, and then snap it closed again, and you're ready to go. Now, something to be watchful of is that you need to make sure that your snap swivel snap here is big enough to go onto the eyelet without locking up. Right? It should be able to move freely in any direction. And so this is about the largest snap swivel I've seen, and it's just a little big, if that makes any sense. A little bit big there. Okay, so it's big enough to slide freely around that. Just a size or two smaller, and it'll start locking up around there. All right, so I'm going to let this dry. I'm going to go back to painting, and then we'll come back and put everything together. Here's my nose cone after several coats of primer. And I'm not sure if you can see this in the video or not, but there's some fine raising of the primer there, and that's actually due to little bits of plastic fuzz in there. And I always expect this. The primer also brings out a lot more detail, so you can see the remnants of the seam here. All right, not too bad on this one, but on this side it's kind of thick. I'm going to wet sand this with some 400 grit sandpaper, and that should be enough to prep it for paint. My paint is thoroughly dry. It's actually been drying for about a week. Life got in the way of rocketry here. So next I'm going to put on the motor retainer. Now for this step we're going to want to use epoxy rather than a super glue or something else, simply because the epoxy is much more heat resistant. Now the inside of this has a nice rough texture there that'll hold glue really well. And then on the motor mount tube, I'm simply going to use a little bit of sandpaper here to roughen that up. And anything between about 40 grit and 100 grit is fine. We're just going to make some scratches here on the outside of the tube. That looks pretty good. And now I'm going to go off camera just a moment here to make up the epoxy. Here I've made about 2 grams of epoxy, and this is 5-minute epoxy. And we're going to apply that to the outer surface of the motor mount tube there rather than to the inner surface of the ring. And the reason for that is any excess epoxy, if we put it on the outside here, that'll get squished down to the bottom and onto the centering ring. If we apply it here, it's going to squish up inside and get inside the motor mount tube, and we don't want that. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and make a ring of epoxy here. And if you get it on the body tube, try to scrape that off. Okay, and we also want to make sure we don't get it down inside the motor mount tube there. Okay, and then once we have that all the way around, simply apply the ring here, push that down. And again, check, make sure we don't have anything squirting out. We can see just a little bit there on the inside of the ring, but that's okay. Alright, so now we will let that harden for about 10 minutes, and then when we come back, we'll do the decals. The decals come on 2 sheets, and it's kind of hard to see them here as it's white against white. Alright, but we have the Cheetah decal here, as well as some of the decals for the fins, and then there are some additional fin decals on the second sheet. And you will have to cut these out. So first I'm going to cut out the Cheetah one here. Now I'll use some scissors to kind of curve around here so we don't have sharp corners that can come up easily. Okay, so on mine, I'm going to put the decal on the opposite side of the launch lugs. And I've got a little basin of water here, and I've added a single drop of dishwashing liquid to that. And this will help us reposition the decal if we need to. So what I'll do here is go ahead and peel off the backing. And let's see, I want mine to go in this direction. And so now I'm just going to put that decal into the soapy water here, and this will temporarily make the adhesive less sticky. And so now I can put this on in what I think is straight. It looks pretty good. Alright, if I needed to though, I could pull that back up and it wouldn't peel the paint up. Now I'm just going to take a couple of tissues here, and once I get this put into place, alright, we can take a tissue and squeegee out the water. Alright, before we can make that completely permanent, I just want to check. It looks pretty good there. I've got a little crud on the decal edge here. Let's see if I can pull this up again. It may be too late. There's like a little dirt accumulated here along the edge. So I'm just going to cut this down carefully. Okay, and now I'm going to go put some more water on there and see if we can get this back where I had it. So something about like that. Okay, and then we'll go ahead and squeegee that back down again. Now you might find that it's got some bubbles in it, or it just doesn't want to adhere. This will take about 48 hours to fully achieve permanence here, and during that time you can just come through and wipe it occasionally and just move those air bubbles and the water out of it. If you want to clear coat this, give it at least 48 hours after the last decal goes on. Now these other decals on both sheets, those are going to go along the fins, and they're meant to go parallel to the rocket. So they've got stripes on them here, and those stripes are supposed to go on the fins like this. Okay, so we'll do kind of the same thing here. We'll go ahead and cut those off. And I'm going to cut mine really close to the edges here, so that mostly I just have the colored material. course, that color is white, but yeah, I'm going to take it all the way to the edges here. And this is personal preference. If you want to keep more of the clear edging, that's fine, as long as it still fits on the fin. There we go. And just like we did with the Cheetah lettering, I'm going to go ahead and pull the backing off of this. And we're going to put that into the water. Now this one is going to go like this. And I'm going to put the white edge right up to the body tube, just where the the fins have got sort of built-in fillets there, so I'm going up to about that. Okay, and then just bring that down. And then as before, just take a tissue here and squeegee that down. As much air out as you can. Okay, now I'm going to continue this off camera for the rest of the fins because this is going to get tedious after a while. And when I come back, we'll put the whole rocket together. I have applied all the decals here, and at least in my kit they sent extra decals, so I've actually got another 3 decals here. I don't know if they're meant to be spares or if they just made a mistake there or what, but I'll hold on to them. Maybe I'll use them on some other rocket at another time. Now I'm ready to put everything together. So here I've got my nose cone. I'm going to scoot the rocket itself over a little bit. Pull out the shock cord. All right, and we're going to tie this onto the nose cone with a double knot, or 2 half hitches. Like that, pull out nice and tight. And then I recommend putting a little dab of wood or white glue on the knot, and it just kind of locks it in place here. Just a little dab, doesn't take much. And just kind of work that in around the knot itself. Okay, and then our last step, if you haven't attached the parachute to the nose cone already, we will do that here. I've got my snap swivel. And I'll just snap that right on there. Now I give that glue just a few minutes to dry, and then we'll pack it all up. Okay, now because this has an ejection baffle in it, we don't have to worry about any wadding or dog barf or things like that when we prepare for launch. I like to just stuff the shock cord down on top of itself rather than trying to coil it up or something like that. And so just feed this downward. And it likes to come back out again. It's hard to get 2 hands doing this and keep it under the camera at the same time here. The idea here, though, is when it comes out, it will come out basically untangled because it's on top of itself. Alright, so when you got most of that in, then we can go ahead and take the parachute here and straighten it out. Alright, and I just kind of fold it down into a triangle, pull the shroud lines up into that triangle, and then fold the edges over. Now, as I've mentioned before, you may want a larger parachute on this. If you're going to shoot it off with the one that comes with it, make sure you got a soft landing surface. Alright, so we'll just stuff that down there and then make sure everything goes in without getting caught between the shoulder of the nose cone and the body tube. Now mine is really loose there. That's going to need some masking tape. Okay, so depending on just how loose yours is, you might want to start with half a circumference. I'm going to go with a whole circumference here because mine's really loose. Okay. Alright, and then give it a shake test here. Alright, that's still staying in place. So I don't have a motor with me, but here's our retaining ring. That'll just screw right onto here with a motor inside. Now it comes with this circle, and this is actually supposed to be a adapter for 24 millimeter motors that have an aft thrust ring. So basically composite motors that have a built-in thrust ring. The Estes black powder motors will not work with this adapter. You have to get a different one. Alright, I'm going to leave that out for now. Okay, and we just, whoops, come on. Screw that on. Okay, and that is ready to go. So here is my Cheetah. Alright, from fore to aft there. Hope you had fun building this rocket with me. Have a great launch and a safe recovery, and please stay tuned for more of my videos.